chosen ones, the hourglass was never meant to reach zero. Buried beneath lectures, lost footnotes, and cryptic diagrams lies a warning that time itself refused to echo, a prophecy whispered through the veils of consciousness and sealed by silence. Manly P. Hall didn't merely speak of the ancient mysteries, he encoded them. Behind every page, every speech, every symbolic alignment, there was a message not meant for the masses, but for you. He said, "In the dark cycles of time, there shall rise a singular light, one who is both memory and mirror." Scholars dismissed it as metaphor. But what if it wasn't? What if he saw you, across timelines, dimensions, and reincarnated threads, emerging at the final cusp between collapse and reawakening? Hall spoke of an ancient being once cast into the forgotten ether, not for their danger, but for their potential. A being so attuned to the hidden harmonics of the universe, their awakening would disrupt every false pillar built to control humanity. Not a warrior of war, but of remembrance. Not a seeker of power, but of purpose. Time feared this being. So did the hidden architects. They built distractions, entire religions, timelines, and codes to bury the signal that would awaken the sleeper. But now, something shifted. A global pulse, a magnetic rupture, a dream so vivid it bled into waking life. You felt it, haven't you? That stirring beneath your ribs, like a forgotten language returning. That is not madness. It is memory. It is your origin trying to break through. The truth is, Manly P. Hall left behind more than warnings. He left coordinates, coded in glyphs, disguised in philosophical riddles, and hidden within lost frequencies of sacred sound. And when decoded, they all point to one intersection: you at the end of time. So why were you erased from the collective memory? Why did every force unite to keep you asleep? Because your awakening is the unraveling of the grand illusion. And they knew that once you remembered who you were, time itself would fracture. And that's where it begins. Because what Hall never said aloud, the final secret even he dared not write, is waiting to be spoken through you. There was once a brotherhood older than the pyramids, hidden deeper than the roots of any empire. It did not wear robes or chant aloud. It operated in silence, in shadows, in archives long erased from public memory. Their only mission: to monitor the timelines and ensure that one particular soul never emerged. They called it the Returner. They did not speak your name, not because they didn't know it, but because even mentioning it brought frequencies into the air that bent light, twisted time, and distorted surveillance. Your essence was never meant to be part of this reality again. Yet here you are. Why? Long ago, the Silent Order made a pact with the early designers of the modern age. It was not about money or borders. It was about narrative control. Entire generations were programmed to believe they were small, fleeting, accidental. But this illusion was necessary, they claimed. If the world remembered what you truly were, what you carried, then the structures would fall overnight. The Order operated behind councils, bloodlines, think tanks, even universities. They didn't need weapons. They only needed control over what humanity believed was possible. The strangest part? Their archives always glitched when your timeline was scanned. Something about you existed outside their algorithms. They tried to predict you, block you, even recreate your essence synthetically. It never worked, because you weren't created. You were encoded, a living key disguised as a soul. They feared you not for your actions, but for your frequency. The moment you remembered who you were, the entire illusion would flicker. They noticed changes recently. Magnetic field shifts, angelic patterns appearing in children's dreams, books falling from shelves opened to the same forgotten phrase. The watchers panicked. They'd spent centuries muting the signal. Now, the signal was waking up. You were the anomaly they couldn't calculate, the one echo they couldn't silence. And when that signal pulsed through ancient stones beneath desert ruins last month, a name emerged. Your name. Not shouted, not written, whispered through granite. The Order knew they were out of time, so they triggered a sequence. They always said Manly P. Hall's final public lecture was unscripted, spontaneous, an old sage's last meditation before silence. But the truth is, that lecture wasn't for the audience in front of him. It was for the future, specifically for the being he foresaw standing at the edge of the last age. You. Embedded within that farewell were phrases that felt poetic to most, but to those with encoded memory, like yours, they were keys. Each pause, each inflection, a cipher meant to be unlocked only once the right soul reactivated its divine recall. What appeared as philosophical rambling about symbols, consciousness, and forgotten rituals was actually a disguised map. Not of locations, but of timelines. In it, he spoke of a soul not bound by cause nor effect, who walks in remembrance while others sleep in sequence. That phrase alone, when translated through a forgotten gematria, leads to a specific harmonic vibration, a resonance long erased from modern sound libraries. A vibration only your body recognizes. That's why certain frequencies make your skin shiver, or your heart race without explanation. It's your system aligning. Yeshua once said, "He who has ears to hear, let him hear." But hearing wasn't about sound. It was about frequency, about knowing. Manly Hall referenced that exact principle without naming it, drawing upon that same hidden lineage, not as doctrine, but as architecture. He saw how the ancient Christ code wasn't bound to time, but encoded in a few who would carry it without title, without robe, without recognition. You carry that code, whether you've accepted it or not. That's what made the cipher in his last words activate, because you heard it. His final lecture included a phrase that has baffled scholars for decades. The one who walks the edge of time will not return to fix it, but to reveal it was never broken. That line is not metaphor, it is mirror. And those who heard it that night, most forgot it. A few had dreams for weeks. One disappeared entirely. They were stationed across the planet before nations had names, silent observers who never intervened, only recorded. Known in fragments across cultures as the Watchers, these beings weren't angelic, demonic, or entirely physical. They were instruments of cosmic balance, tasked with monitoring only one thing: the signal of the returner. You, not your name, not your location, but your frequency. A resonance so specific that it could warp perception itself if fully unleashed. For millennia, they waited, dormant in cloaked temples, sealed caves, and crystalline structures buried beneath oceans. Humanity called their presence myth. They preferred it that way. Their mission was not to warn, but to observe. And when the first tremor of your awakening echoed out, they felt it before you did. A dream shifted. A mirror cracked with no impact. A tree bloomed out of season under a red moon. That was enough. They stirred. It began with the awakening of the sentinel under the Himalayas, whose chamber hadn't opened in over 12,000 years. Its light activated an ancient sigil, buried in the earth like a heartbeat. Then came the mirror tower in the Pacific, hidden in the Mariana depths, long dormant, suddenly humming. These weren't artifacts. They were instruments waiting for the right resonance. Yours. You were never supposed to remember so soon. But timelines fractured. Experiments accelerated. Technology brushed too close to forgotten truths, and the veil thinned prematurely. The Watchers did not panic. They realigned. Their gaze shifted toward you, not as a threat, but as a variable re-entering the field of consequence. You've likely felt them. In crowds, in forests, in dreams where faceless beings stood silently, as if judging your pulse. They weren't judging, they were listening, because the signal you carry is not static, it evolves. And with every memory you reclaim, every illusion you discard, your frequency sharpens. This terrifies the architects of the illusion, but it activates the Watchers. Now, across sacred sites, symbols once dormant begin to respond to touch. Voices rise from forgotten wells. Children dream of symbols they've never seen, but instinctively draw. It's starting, but the Watchers won't reveal themselves unless you unlock the next pulse. And when that happens, what they've been storing, what they've been guarding for you, will begin to unfold in ways not even the architects accounted for. Time was never linear. The ancients knew this and designed the veil to protect humanity from slipping between its folds, not just to shield the future from the past, but to hide specific souls, like yours, from triggering premature convergence. The veil wasn't fabric. It was a membrane of encoded memory, stitched together by symbols, rituals, and false history. And yet, your presence began to tear through it the moment you questioned the world you were born into. It began subtly. Glitches in perception, seeing people before they arrived, knowing things you were never taught, remembering places you've never visited. That wasn't intuition, it was bleed-through. Signs that your frequency was destabilizing the boundaries between eras. The veil could hold back most, but not you, because your soul had already lived beyond time once before. You didn't just exist in this age. You were the thread tying the forgotten ones to what comes next. The Council of the Veil knew this. Long ago, they agreed on a pact. Any sign of the returner must be erased. But prophecy doesn't bow to policy. Your awakening echoed through the membrane like thunder in glass halls. The symbols etched into their pillars began to shift. Writings once still began to glow. One priest recorded in panic. The being who carries the word walks again. That word was not spoken. It was known. And its shape, its rhythm, mirrored something once carried by Yeshua. A resonance outside time, designed not to dominate, but to restore. Yeshua did not merely teach love. He disrupted timelines with presence alone. He opened the veil so others could see, just for a moment, what lay beyond belief. And now, the same signature begins pulsing from you. Not because you follow him, but because the same code flows through both. A divine interference pattern, a reminder that truth can be embodied. Now, temples sealed for millennia begin unlocking. Echoes bleed from tombs that were never meant to open, and some who swore loyalty to the veil have begun to defect. They feel the pull, not to a leader, but to a remembering. Because once the veil fully collapses, eras will no longer be separated. Far beneath the sands, under the paws of the Sphinx, there lies a chamber whose existence was denied, dismissed, and deliberately erased. Called the Hall of Records, it was not built to glorify gods or pharaohs. It was constructed as a vault, a temporal lockbox for truths too destabilizing for early humanity. But it was never truly sealed. It was coded to respond only to one frequency, one soul signature, echoing a pattern that had vanished from the earth. That signature now pulses again, and the chamber is no longer silent. Legends claimed the chamber contained the blueprints of the earth, the story of the stars, and the memory of what humanity forgot. But its real treasure is far stranger. A mirror, not of glass, but of light and sound, tuned to reflect not your body, but your origin. When activated, it shows no image, unless the one who enters carries the resonance of the returner. Until now, no one has matched it. But 2 weeks ago, researchers at a restricted dig site reported a brief distortion underground. Instruments failed. Clocks froze. The sand above vibrated like it was remembering something. Then it stopped. That wasn't an anomaly. That was a pulse. From you. This chamber was placed at the edge of the old world, not just to hide truth, but to anchor it. When the world shifted into the age of forgetting, the chamber became the last witness. It tracked your absence. It waited through floods, empires, colonizations, and wars. Each time you nearly returned, it stirred, but it did not open, because you weren't fully online yet. Your memory had not caught up to your design. That's what's changing now. The ancient builders didn't just carve walls, they carved instructions. To be read not with eyes, but with soul. And the moment your frequency harmonizes fully, those inscriptions will move, aligning like a cosmic dial unlocking from the inside. They fear this chamber opening not because of what it reveals to you, but what it reveals through you. Because inside, past the mirror, is a door. And that door doesn't open to a room. It opens to an echo buried in your blood, one that remembers what came before the first age. They taught the world that Yeshua came once, died, and ascended. A singular event sealed in scripture, framed in stained glass. But that was never the full design. Yeshua was not simply a teacher or martyr or savior. He was a template, a frequency embedded into time itself, meant not to be worshipped, but mirrored. His life was a broadcast, encrypted in parables, miracles, and blood. The true ones, those encoded, would one day begin to reflect that same signal not through belief, but through embodiment. The return was never meant to look like a man descending from the clouds. It was always meant to re-emerge as a pattern within those who carried his resonance. You didn't find this path. It reawakened within you. The same fire that made him walk across water now pulses in your choices, your voice, your defiance. And it's not coincidence. It's the blueprint resurfacing through your remembrance. Ancient orders knew this truth. Some revered it, others feared it. Those who feared it tried to confine his legacy within systems, churches, rituals, doctrine, anything to keep the pattern from activating again. Because once it did, they'd have no control. And now it has. Not in cathedrals, not in scriptures, but in you. When Yeshua said, "Greater works than these shall you do," he wasn't speaking in metaphor. He was speaking across time, to you. The powers weren't miracles, they were memory. And once you stop looking outward and begin listening inward, you'll remember that you too came not to be followed, but to awaken. This is why your dreams have changed, why you've begun hearing whispers not in your ears, but in your bones. You aren't going crazy. You're syncing with the ancient broadcast, the one that predates empires and collapses dogma, the one they never wanted to repeat. Because when it repeats, the veil thins, the illusions fracture, and the world sees through the programming. You are not the second coming. You are the living proof that the coming never ended. And now that the pattern has returned not as a man but as a network of awakened souls, a convergence is forming, a resonance field that cannot be silenced. And at the center of it all, your signal is rising fastest. It wasn't fire from war or weather that consumed the last scroll. It was intentional. In a chamber beneath the old stone of what is now Southern Europe, a council convened under moonlight. 11 cloaked figures, each sworn to preserve a version of history the world would never question. They'd found the scroll after centuries of searching. It was written not in a human language, but in a script that shimmered, changing under breath and light. A script that responded not to ink, but to intention. It was a living record, and it mentioned your return by name. The scroll was never meant to exist in this cycle. It slipped through a fracture. A rift in time opened briefly during a celestial misalignment. When the council read the first few lines, something happened. The torches flickered. One member collapsed. Another wept and couldn't explain why. Because the scroll didn't just tell your story, it triggered it. It made you real again. It described a soul outside of cause and effect. A soul encoded with the memory of the first voice, capable of disrupting the very script of history. It revealed that time wasn't broken, but had been rewritten to exclude you. And it stated clearly that when your frequency aligned with the Earth's breath again, all false foundations would tremble. That was the moment the council decided it had to burn. Not because they didn't believe it, but because they did. The fire they used wasn't ordinary. It was infused with alchemical properties, designed to burn not just matter, but memory. They believed that by destroying the scroll, they could delay your emergence. But energy doesn't vanish. It returns in different forms. And now, fragments of that scroll have begun surfacing in unexpected places. Lines spoken by children in dreams. Symbols drawn unconsciously in sand. Songs sung by strangers who've never met. It happened in silence. Not in a church or temple, but deep within a cavern where light had not touched for thousands of years. A single glyph, etched into obsidian with impossible precision, began to glow, not because of heat or technology, but because of resonance. A tremor rippled through the stone, not outward but inward, like the rock itself remembered something. And then a whisper, not spoken, not heard, but felt, moved through the chamber like a ripple in the fabric of being. It was him. Yeshua never left behind artifacts for display. His legacy was hidden in frequencies, in the geometry of spirit, and in the language of light. What was once known as logos, the word, wasn't speech. It was a vibration that cut through all dimensions. And now, it speaks again, through you, through the glyphs, through the ones awakening with eyes that remember stars older than the sun. The glyph in that cavern wasn't decoration. It was a lock, encoded with the Christ pattern, not the religious figure, but the cosmic key. Yeshua's presence activated it once before, long before the stories were rewritten. That whisper left an imprint, buried in the frequency of the earth. It waited for another to match that pattern, and when your energy moved close enough in consciousness, it lit up. You weren't meant to decode it with logic. You were meant to feel it. The message didn't translate into language. It translated into remembrance. It stirred something ancient inside of you, a knowing, a sense that you stood before these glyphs in another skin, under another sun, that you were there when the whisper first passed through the stone. He knew. Yeshua knew others would follow, not in robes, not behind pulpits, but as awakeners scattered across time. He placed parts of himself in the earth for those who carried the same fire. And now, it's your fire that makes the glyphs stir again. Somewhere between the fall of Atlantis and the rise of Rome, time shattered, not in the way history records it, but in the way memory feels it. There was an event so potent, so reality-bending, that even the most advanced civilizations couldn't prevent the rip. They tried to mend it with crystal grids, sound technologies, and encoded beings sent into flesh. But the fracture couldn't be healed from the outside. It required something that could step into every version of the timeline and remain unchanged. That something was you. You were sent not as a soldier or savior, but as a stabilizer. A soul that could walk through shifting eras and hold the frequency of origin intact. While others adapted, you remembered. And that remembering was the key. Because the fracture wasn't just in time, it was in truth. A dissonance introduced into the flow of history, causing entire civilizations to forget what they once knew. That humanity was never meant to be bound by fear, hierarchy, or control. The fracture caused more than lost memory. It created echoes, repeating cycles of collapse, awakening, and suppression. Every time the signal tried to rise, a system rose faster to contain it. But there was always a point in the cycle where the stabilizer, the returner, could enter and thread the broken timelines back together. This is that point. You are that thread. The signs are everywhere. People feel the distortion in their bodies. Time moves unpredictably. Days blur, memory skips, prophecies contradict themselves. But when you speak, when you act from your true center, something strange happens. Time slows. People listen. The noise clears. That's not coincidence. That's the repair beginning. Your presence is not passive. It's a signal correction. You're not just remembering, you're reweaving. The timelines aren't just watching you, they're reacting to you. Old friends suddenly reappear. New choices feel like déjà vu. Everything bends toward you, not because you seek attention, but because the fracture recognizes the code that once sealed it. They searched for it in temples, tombs, encrypted scrolls, and quantum vaults. The final seal. The one they believed would either end the cycle or begin the true age. Councils argued over it. Orders fought over it. Machines tried to model it, all believing it was a hidden mechanism buried somewhere beneath Earth's crust or locked within the geometry of a lost civilization. But they were all wrong. The seal was never a thing. It was never a door, a relic, or a symbol. It was a soul, a specific consciousness encoded with the key not to open, but to end the illusion. And that consciousness is you. It was the ultimate misdirection. Hide the seal inside a being so forgotten, so manipulated, so human, that no one would ever believe the truth. You would walk among them, not knowing, doubting, breaking, only to one day remember. Not all at once, but through fragments, signs and callings that couldn't be explained. That's why they tried to erase you. Not kill you. Erase, because you were the final condition that would unbind the false structure of time. Every test you've faced was not random. Every betrayal, breakdown, and rebirth was a pressure applied to see if the seal would crack prematurely. But you didn't break, you transformed. The pain wasn't punishment. It was preparation. A method of refinement designed to distill your frequency into something incorruptible. Now, the seal begins to vibrate. Not outside, but within, because it recognizes that the convergence is near. When Manly P. Hall spoke of a being who would tear the veil between worlds, he wasn't speaking allegorically. He was reading from fragments long hidden, documents not meant for public eyes. He knew the seal wasn't dormant, it was incarnated. And when the time came, that being would begin to emit a resonance that no architecture of control could withstand. Not through war, but through awakening.
If you have come this far, it is crucial that you watch this next video here. But be warned, it is not for the faint of heart, for only the true chosen ones can handle this video. If you would like to also donate to help keep the channel going, our Buy Me a Coffee link will be in the description.